Well, here we are here on the campus of the University of Georgia, a pretty quiet place. I'm practicing social distancing until we're given the all clear to get a little bit closer. I'm joined this month by Dr. Jason Gordon. He's Assistant Professor of Community Forestry in the Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources. And Doc, if I was to look at a tree like this and consider to myself if I wanted to build my own deer stand for later in the fall, or put a tree house in a tree like this, which would be cool. We're at the visitor center. Dr. Gordon, what are some of the things I might want to consider about the site before I build something like this?
Well, Nick, there's a lot of different things you have to consider, but three primary things that I want to point out, and we're speaking generally here,
okay,
and from any kind of context. But number one is you got to look for a target. And here we have two important targets at least. We have the building there and you're thinking about if this tree could fall, and this is a fairly old tree, or a part of the tree could fail and fall onto that building and cause damage. The second target is here in the parking area.
Oh yeah.
And cars park here, and you got to think about the frequency of whether people use the target or how that target is inhabited. So you got to think about the target. That's very important. The second important thing to think about is the history of the site. And has that site had some kind of construction in the past? How is the drainage of the site? All of these kinds of things can affect the structural integrity of the tree. And the third thing you got to think about is the weather. And what we're talking about here is not weather like today, a beautiful day. We're talking about weather in kind of extreme conditions, a storm with strong winds or an ice storm of some sort. That's when you're going to probably see the failure of the tree happen.
And what great things to think about. And we're going to talk next about specifics with this tree and things to look for. But the site where we are, I've thought about building a tree house near maybe the driveway and how much of a problem that could be. So let's talk next about some specifics with the tree and some things that you might look for as a professional before we think about building. So let's go there next. Okay, so from the site evaluation side, Jason, now we're walking up to this beautiful water oak here on campus. Walk me through, what are some things you're looking at in this specimen before we're going to decide about putting a tree forward or a deer stand?
Well, that's a very good question, Nick. So first, the thing you got to think about is the species of the tree. It's very important to consider the species because different species are stronger than other species. A water oak, for example, is a fairly weak species. And if you know what a water oak is, you've seen one in your yard, it always has a bunch of junk, little twigs and things falling from it all the time.
Okay.
So it's a fairly weak tree. You got to think about that. The second thing, we always start we always look at the crown, the stem, and the roots of the tree. You got to look at all three pieces of the tree when you're thinking about the integrity of that tree.
Okay.
So in the crown here, one thing we might look at, for example, is how the limbs are attached to the stem or attached to each other. We want strong attachments. And sometimes when these limbs are weakly attached, they haven't grown together correctly. And there's basically nothing connecting them to each other. And when the wind blows, there's torsion like this. The tree moves and it can just split those limbs off.
Interesting. Okay.
Another thing to look for if we move down the stem of the tree is for codominant stems. And it's very common for trees to have, particularly certain species like Bradford pears, to have codominant stems. Not that you build in the Bradford pear, right. but a lot of other trees have that as well. Codominant stems are where two more or less equal weighted stems grow up like a V. And that's very important. They come together as a V. And again, that's a weak attachment, or can be a weak attachment. And when the tree twists in that kind of extreme weather, in that storm, it just kind of rips apart.
I gotcha.
And so that's why you see so much failure in that way. So then the third place we look, and you can never forget about this, it's so important, are the roots. And as part of the roots, we have a very critical area called the root plate. And that's this area basically where this pine straw is at. Okay. And that is the perhaps the most important part of this tree from a structural standpoint. And so we have to consider what kind of condition the roots are in that root plate. Are they starting to rot? Is there a fungus in there? And a number of other things having to do with the soil.
Now I got to ask this, just as a tree lover, nailing into this tree, when you talked about the stem, Folks at home that might be worried about doing that and hurting the tree, talk to us about that. How do we avoid that?
Well, you can install hardware into a tree, and again, it depends on the species. Some species do better with it than other species.
Okay.
But you can certainly put hardware into a tree without incurring too much risk in terms of how that tree will respond from a health standpoint. However, if the more hardware you put into it, the higher risk is incurred.
Yeah.
What you really want to do ideally is to build around the tree. A lot of tree stands, for example, do not install anything into the tree. That's what you want to do preferably.
So a beautiful water oak on solid ground here at the UGA Visitor Center. We brought Jason back in. Jason, as you look at this tree and everything we've talked about today, what's your overall assessment of this guy?
This is a healthy tree.
Good.
Very healthy water oak. They've done a great job with it. They have certified arborists working on this campus, and I just can't say enough about the good job that they do with the trees on this campus. So very safe.
That's incredible, and we're fortunate for that at UGA. But if someone at home doesn't have an arborist, doesn't have a professional that can do these kinds of things, what could we do at home to assess and mitigate some of this?
Well, Nick, the first thing they got to think about is and they probably, in some cases, they'll have to contact a professional, but in general, pruning the crown, taking out the dead wood, taking out weakly connected branches like I talked about earlier, making the tree happy, babying the tree, make sure it has mulch and things like that is all good. The other thing really important is to continue monitoring this tree. It's a living organism, so you have to keep an eye on it. You can't just forget about it, because even after you build the tree house, you got to make sure that that tree stays healthy.
That's right.
And then the third thing, and you have to bring in a professional for this, but if there is compaction in the soil on a very special tree like this tree, not all trees, but a very special tree, an arborist can actually come in and aerate the ground, and there's certain techniques for that, and to kind of allow improve the soil conditions around that tree.
Jason, thanks so much for spending time with me today. I hope you all have enjoyed this one. Y'all know what to do. When you're online checking out the YouTube videos of our past Ranger Nick episodes, hop on over to the Farm Monitor Facebook page and check out what's going on there. And until next time, as we always say, Jason, for the Farm Monitor, I'm Ranger Nick, reminding you that enthusiasm is contagious, so pass it on. Y'all, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you right back here again next month. See ya.